Hello and welcome back. And I'm here with coverage of Harry and Meghan, their Netflix documentary. We have been so excited for this. I know many of you got up and were already on Netflix waiting for the episodes to drop. So as my channel supporters know, it's been a busy time for me. So I'm so glad that I've gotten this chance to try and cover some of these events. So we have a lot to talk about. So I've got to say that I was privileged to watch the documentary, and I watched all the first 3 episodes. So I'm talking about something that I've watched, not something that, is disseminated down from articles and, people just picking out narratives that suit them. So I feel like I have a whole grasp of what was put forth. So let's have a quick rundown. First and foremost, Prince Harry and Meghan talked about how they first met. They talked about meeting on Instagram. We already know that they spoke about their first date. It was a setup, as they said in their interview. But Prince Harry actually says that he was scrolling his feed on Instagram, and one of his friends had posted a video with the two of them, and they had on a Snapchat filter. And Meghan talked about the fact that it was a dog face filter too, so that was her first impression that Harry had of her. And Prince Harry saw through that and said, "Who is that?" So Meghan revealed in their sit down that the unnamed friend told her that Prince had asked about her, and Meghan asked if she could see his feed, and she talked about the fact that she wanted to see what he had put out about himself, not what, articles had. And also she asked who's Prince Has, because that's how the friend had put forth the information about Prince Harry. She called him, or he called him, Prince Has. I'm guessing it's a she. So they talked about the DMs and they exchanged numbers, and they talk also about the first date that they had. And I love that Meghan does say that he was late for the first date. And I love how she talks about the fact that when she saw it that he was late, she was like, "No, I am not doing this." She felt like perhaps he was full of ego and thought that because of his position that any woman would just sit there and wait. But when she saw the state that he was in, I think she forgave him. And oh my gosh, when they talk about this being a love story, it is. And they talk about the fact that they had such a fun time exploring the childlike nature, especially of Prince Harry. And I like how they say that they took the one photo to capture the moment of just what it felt like. Then, fast forward a bit, they talk about the fact that they saw each other again, and Prince Harry, after only having met her twice, he told her, or asked her rather, to join him on a visit to Botswana, and he was astonished when she said yes. So Prince Harry talks about his love for the continent, and of course, I love the fact that he had Prince say so on this documentary, talking about how Harry had that time with him in Lesotho and the warmth that he felt in Africa. I think that's something that was so healing to Prince Harry. And just allow me to just segue and put this in here. For a prince to find a lot of joy and peace and warmth and feel like he has a home in Africa, I mean, that just has to tell you that there's something that the media does not tell you about the narrative concerning the continent. If a prince has to just get away from it all in Africa, then I think everyone of African descent, especially all over the world, needs to just reset from all of the narratives about the continent. And yes, in fact, find a way to come to the continent. It will change your life for the better. So I had to put that in here. Now back to the fact that Prince Harry whisks Meghan off to Africa, and he says that he was astonished, as I said, because they would be alone together. And Meghan herself was kind of terrified about this, because she said that when they were out there in, she called it the bush. Of course, in that aspect, they were on some kind of safari, so no one has to take that out of context. They would be in a tent together, alone, no cell reception. And she asked what if they didn't like each other. So they were there, and Prince Harry said that he felt it was so critical to share Africa with Meghan. And he talked about how when they met again after a long time, it was awkward, but he gave her a sandwich and they hopped on to the tour vehicle, and they just had a great time. And he talks about how they progressed from holding hands and squeezing in a kiss. And it felt totally normal and natural. And I love the fact that Meghan talks about her time there. You know, Meghan is a girl's girl for sure. So, and of course, the conditions that they were in that specific circumstance where they were out together in a tent, no distractions, as she said. And she said there was no way to check on how she looked. There was no mirror. So for her, it was quite a departure from her set life. But she said that even out there when they were all alone, she was so thankful that they liked each other. So they could be completely themselves. And I think that is just so sweet. So she talked about her trust for Prince Harry in that environment, which she wasn't particularly used to. And she talked about hearing rustling in the night, and he would assure her that everything was okay. She talked about hearing an elephant eating something, and she said that she just trusted him as he took her into that aspect of, a world that he was used to. The relationship progressed. They had a rule about making sure that they saw each other. I think it was like a 2-week rule that they should not go beyond that without seeing each other. And she would fly out from Toronto and see him, just low-key at his residence there in the palace. I think it's Kensington Palace, and they would have quiet times together and really get to know each other. And they have that sweet moment where Prince Harry is showing her, I think, around the grounds and having some fun with some swans, and Meghan is laughing. They are so goofy and sweet in that. So they also talk about the fact that they found out from the palace, they gave them a heads up that the story about them was about to drop, revealing their romance. So Meghan, Harry, along with his cousin Princess Eugenie and her now husband Jack, decided to, quote, pull the pin on the fun grenade, and they had a night out. Look at the photos there of them. They shared some never before seen photos from the night where both Harry and Meghan are incognito in masks. And I mean, everyone looks like they're having a fun time. So of course the news drops, and at first they talk about feeling so relieved, and then how the narrative started to shift. Now, I love how they talk about how Prince Harry took his time to word that strong statement about the racist undertones of some of the coverage. We've talked about this on this channel as well. The straight out of Compton almost. Talking about her coming up in some crime-infested neighborhood. The othering of Meghan, and how that seeped into social media. And here's when we learn something that's quite interesting. For all the people who are preemptively talking about how this documentary would be all about attacks on the royal family and people bracing for what he would say, isn't it quite interesting here that Prince Harry pulls back the curtain and shows us who he is really calling out? The tabloid media, and of course the ripple effect of what happens on social media. And they shared also some of the vile articles and messages that were put towards Meghan, how her life shifted. They talk about the paparazzi coverage of her. People started hanging out on her set there on Suits, and of course Meghan, being the team player that she is, she didn't want to inconvenience the set. Even as now new protocols were in place to protect her. They had to fence off the set. She had to have her own personal security. And even the person who was watching over her said that, for her, he had never seen that kind of interest. And of course, the negative side of it. And of course, Meghan being in the public sphere, she had a lot to think about that time, because she, as a social butterfly of sort, loving to interact with her fans, now with this element that was coming in, that made her have a lot of pause, because once again, now she had to be on her guard. with all the interest that was coming against her, she couldn't be sure of who, could be around her. And people talk about this with people in the public eye, with the coverage and with the interest that surrounds them. It attracts, different kinds of people. And of course, they have to be on the lookout for those who, may have some negative agenda, who, may be in some way unstable. So when she talks about the fact that she felt some type of fear and discomfort, that does come from a very genuine place. And if you do your own research on, a lot of these public figures, they're told most of the time the people they need to be totally aware of are people who are unstable. And of course, some of this is triggered by headline coverage on them. And we all know the conspiracy theories that have surrounded Meghan thus far, right? So yeah, they talk about that as well. So we find out, once again, Harry isn't calling out the royal family per se. He's talking about how ruthless the media can be, especially with some of the women who marry into the institution. They are treated some kind of way. And isn't it interesting? He comes to the defense of even how Kate was bullied when she joined in. Camilla also went through her own, we can debate whether it was deserved or not, when one, of course, considers how she came to be in her position. He talks about what happened with his mother, what happened with him as a young man coming up, how the paparazzi would wait for him outside the nightclub and keep rehashing the same tales and blowing them out of proportion, and how he would be told never react because that's what they want. And keep this in mind when I talk about Prince Harry talking about how they should never react to the paparazzi and never try to fuel their source of supply, because you give them something to write about, they will milk it. So keep that in mind as we move forward. Prince Harry knows all about this, and Meghan, as she joined into the royal family, she was only starting to learn this. So just put a pin on that. I'll get back to that later. So Meghan talks about meeting members of the royal family. She talks about the fact that she is a hugger. And Meghan also shares her very first meeting with, her in-laws, Kate and William. And she says this: when Kate came over and I had met her for the first time, they came over for dinner. I remember I was in ripped jeans and barefoot. I was a hugger, always been a hugger, she says. And I didn't realize that is really jarring for a lot of Brits, end quote. And then she talks about the fact that she started to understand very quickly that the formality on the outside carried through on the inside. She talks about that. I wonder what that was all about. I'm sure there's a story there as well. So she talks about the fact that there is a forward-facing way, in quotes, of being, and that she felt that perhaps when they closed the doors that they could, just relax and breathe. But she was so surprised that the formality carried through on both sides. Totally surprising for her. And now here I'll interject and say this. Sources spoke to some outlets and said that members of the royal family were not consulted, were not approached for comment on the content of the documentary. So this came from Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace. They said that none of them were contacted. So Buckingham Palace said that they had no public response to the documentary, and a palace official claimed that filmmakers did not reach out to King Charles, William, or other members of the royal family for comment. That contradicted an on-screen message at the start of the first episode, which said, quote, members of the royal family declined to comment on the content within the series, end quote. An executive at Netflix, though, said that filmmakers did contact communications representatives for Charles and William. And then they went on to say, and now the palace's claims got shakier when officials there later acknowledged receiving emails from someone with a production company. And they said that they were unable to verify the person's identity and they did not respond. So this is according to officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity in keeping with palace protocol. So isn't that interesting? Now, of course, we know that Netflix did do their due diligence trying to reach out to, both Kensington Palace, Buckingham Palace, to comment, because that is the ethical practice in a documentary. You want to get both sides of the story, or else, it's just fluff for one side of one team. So yeah, part of that coverage as well. So let me know what you think about that as well. So it's interesting, Meghan talking about how she she was surprised by the stiffness and formality, if I can say, and she might have chalked that up to British character or culture. So that was a very interesting moment as well. So now it's interesting that this documentary also looks at Britain's colonial and slave trade past. I mean, if we're going to talk about history or empire, we're going to talk about all of it. We are not just going to talk about the abolition and not even talk about the fact that it was only the slave owners who were given reparations. I mean, if we're going to talk about history, let's talk about all of it and not gloss over what people have gone through, the suffering that they have gone through. And it's not to point fingers or to blame. It's so that there can be that acknowledgement and healing and even humanity. I think this is something that people don't really understand. When people face these issues and talk about them, it's also healing for the people who are descended from not only those who were colonized or enslaved, but those who were doing the colonizing and the enslaving, the descendants of those people. It's not to blame them, it's to help them own a part of their own humanity and empathy. I wish people can just understand that. When people say that has nothing to do with them, forget about the past, that's inhumane. It's healing on both sides. So I love the fact that the documentary makers, they touch on that. They have prominent British commentators who talk about this. They also try to shape the fact that perhaps there is a trickle down from that empire mentality that affected Meghan and made her, quote, unsuitable, and made it that she was caricatured in a kind of way that when the Brexit thing happened, Megxit. No matter how many times Prince Harry said, I protected my family, I made the decision, it was Meghan. Why? And don't say it's only because or when Meghan came into the picture that Harry had now to back away from, his duties and all that. But what is the why? Who is he having to protect now? So Prince Harry talked about the fact that he had his own racial biases. We've seen he owned a mistake in that documentary. It was so surprising and amazing how he wore his Nazi outfit. And he says that he had blind spots because he is not only in a bubble, but in a bubble within a bubble. So it was interesting to see him talk about how he's had his own journey, and it's healing for him and healing for that acknowledgement that, yeah, he made a mistake. He reached out to the communities impacted at the time. He said he was deeply ashamed, not only of what he did, I'm sure for what, blowback it brought on his own family at the time, wanting to please his dad and on and on. So let's talk about it all. Not just the parts of history that make someone feel good, but the part that they can also touch on and address and try to heal, So yeah, it's interesting. They touch on that. And I love how I think her name is Afua Hirsch. She says that she thought that Prince Harry was just some kind of a slightly racist. This documentary was hard hitting. It wasn't just, fluff piece for Harry and Meghan. As much as we were all oohing and awing, especially at the love part of the story and all that, and the dating and the courtship and everything. But my gosh, there were some parts in this that were so, so deep, right? So let's give credit where credit is due. And remember this, Prince Harry and Meghan are not editing this documentary. It's in the hands of other people. Their part is just to put forth their own story, yeah? So let's go on. Also, wonderfully enough, we have all these snippets and images of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex at home. We have them having Archie's first birthday. with Doria, just as we imagined it, a smash cake. Prince Harry wheeling Archie around on a suitcase, just a big kid at heart. Meghan sharing her own journey of pregnancy and motherhood and how she keeps her home and the love they have for their children, the hikes, the walks. Prince Harry having that moment where he wants Archie to focus on the hummingbirds and Archie's just talking about his dirty foot. Of course, then we get to hear from Doria. That was so impactful. My gosh, just looking at her and how she's had to see her flower, Meghan, going through so much. My gosh, that part almost made me tear up. Of course, that is the human element of what all this coverage does. Meghan's mom watching her, her girl going through it all. And she even talked about the fact that she told Meghan that this is about race. And Meghan was like, she didn't want to hear that. And, Doria wishes that she had the talk with Meghan. And Meghan talked about the fact that she, at the time, wasn't thinking about how race played any part in it. Because she, of course, now we all know that Meghan's mixed race. But back then, people did not specifically know what she was. And they didn't treat her like a, quote, black woman. So the talk never happened for her. And, Doria talks about how she, she's been disappointed in the coverage, how she's been stalked by the media. Of course, she also talked about how Thomas, her ex-husband, has, his own input. And that was also surprising as well. They opened up about that. And yeah, it's just, there was just so much that this documentary covered. And talking about how the paparazzi has really impacted Meghan, and Prince Harry says that Meghan has just had to adjust so much. And with her own relationship with her dad, now it feels like she doesn't have one because of all that happened with the paparazzi and with all that just came in and the decision making that was not good concerning the collaboration with them. And they talk about how they tried to reach out to Thomas and he would just, he wouldn't pick up. That whole mess that happened and the whole wind down to the wedding. So that's a whole part of the story. I'm sure they're going to continue to unpack as we get the next bunch of episodes. So yes, Prince Harry once again also talked to Meghan about the paparazzi and how to deal with them. He coached her on what to do. And they talked about the fact that when the relationship had gone public, how I said before, they felt relief. And then Meghan had this one moment where she talked about coming out of the flower shop. And she said that there must have been about 9 or 10 paparazzi waiting in the middle of the street for her. And they were blocking cars and saying, "Hey, how are you doing, Meghan?" And she was like, "Oh, thanks. Stay warm, guys." And she remembered Prince Harry the next day saying, "You can't talk to them." And she was like, "I'm just trying to be pleasant. I don't know what to do. I've never dealt with this before." And he said, "Right now, you can't do that because the UK media are saying that you love it. You're smiling, therefore you love it." So bear that in mind. Prince Harry, he knows how things can be spun out of just a small moment. A smile could generate so many headlines. You can imagine, as we saw that story of her, think of all the times we've seen the image with Meghan and the flowers, walking in the street. We don't know the context, but she's smiling. And yeah, people say, she must have wanted this to happen. But we forget her own background is an actress in Hollywood, and their background is to be warm with their own correspondents and people who take pictures of them, to be warm to their fans because that's your fan base. You can't be standoffish, So for her, it would have been so natural to see, people are outside. Perhaps do they want autographs? Do they want just the picture of the day to put it up in some, glossy magazine? But she was not factoring in how it would translate in the UK, and Prince Harry was trying to coach her through it. So she was learning. So this is where I'll segue into a moment that a lot of people are trying to pick apart in this documentary. Meghan talks about meeting the Queen for the first time. And this is something that people are saying, oh, she disrespected the Queen as she tried to reenact her curtsy, because she, in the context of it, was saying that it was something that was out of the blue. It wasn't planned. Prince Harry just told her his grandma was around and she would go up and meet her. He told Meghan, do you know how to curtsy? And Meghan thought, in the back of her mind, that's a joke. So she would have to learn that curtsy just a few minutes before meeting the Queen, and she reenacts it there for people on the screen. Now, look at Prince Harry's face. A lot of the body language experts, even some in quotes, will be trying to pick apart what his reaction is. I'll say, yeah, definitely he does look at some points mildly unamused by what she's doing. Why? May I ask? In my humble opinion, I think it's because he knows that what she did right there will be picked apart, and he wishes like he could just pause time and tell her not to do it. And Meghan, in many ways, has learned quite a bit, but she is still on that learning curve of how the tabloids will just take a moment and blow it up out of proportion and keep rehashing it anytime they need some story on her. You can imagine with all that's been touched on in this documentary and how they've immediately gone after the media, they're looking for any way to pick them apart. So would Prince Harry perhaps have paused time and said, Meg, perhaps don't do that. It will be misconstrued as you're disrespecting the Queen or the culture or, protocol in the royal family. Yeah, perhaps. We're not here on looking at all this with, rose-tinted spectacles or whatever. That not because she was mocking the Queen, she was definitely mocking at herself. Her detractors will just spin that any other way, that she's mocking the Queen, insulting the Queen. I mean, we've heard it a 1,000 times. So yeah, that is American culture. They would not think to bow to their own grandparents in private, let alone the whole curtsying thing. I think that just does not translate very well in the US. Just as Prince William and Kate attested to in Boston, the place that is famous for the whole tea incident and getting, the yoke of the monarchy off of them, they don't take to that. The land of the free, the home of the brave, they don't take to the whole, someone else is above them because, Meghan isn't mocking at the Queen. She isn't. She's obviously mocking at how fast she had to learn to curtsy. Did she do it well? In that moment, she talks about how, I think it's Eugenie or someone else was there, said, you did great. Your curtsy was great. In her own Americanism. The same way she says that when she told Prince Harry the second time, let's go out. She said that she did that in her own American way, and she may have been forward, and she of course thought she would be, and Prince Harry of course mentioned it later. He was like, that's American right there. Can we just take offense out of this? Yet, of course, people know mostly in most American culture, people tend to be, forthright, speak their minds, and if you want something, go out and get it. There is also that divide in British culture, especially with the royal family, and that whole understanding. In hindsight, would she perhaps not have done it because now her detractors will take that and try and steer the message away from them, who they're trying to call out? Perhaps, hindsight is 50-50 after all. So this is what I meant when I said we would circle back to that pin. So there's context in all of this. Prince Harry, he knows how tabloid media can be. And even, mainstream, sometimes they can get really ruthless. But oh my gosh, the tabloids are on a whole other level. And Prince Harry has dealt with them. So let's just circle back once again to the moment where I told you that, just put a pin in that, when Prince Harry was told as a young man not to react, never to fuel their feeding frenzy, never to give them any kind of material to work with. So, he has had that ingrained in him. And it's an education for them, a constant work to navigate that space of, tabloid media and what to say and what not to say and how that might be blown out of proportion. So, yeah, so that's covered. So by the way, another highlight for me when we talk about the wedding itself, and we've heard a lot about Meghan's guest list, and now we got to see a part of the story that was so moving, where Meghan basically took under her wing her niece, and that is the daughter of Samantha Markle, and she was like a big sister to her. Meghan said she always wanted a sister, so she took her under her wing. They would even go on vacations together, and they had such a close relationship. But because of all of the drama coming up to the wedding, where Samantha suddenly was in the press talking about Meghan being pushy, Meghan was advised by their then communications secretary to drop, I think her name is Ashley, from the wedding list. And one more person that Meghan would have wanted there was out. And this was her just taking on the advice of those in the institution, taking it on board, and how emotionally sad that was to see that Meghan had to sacrifice so much coming up to her own wedding, even those very close relationships in her own family that were built up because of all of that drama. That was emotional. Once again, another tearjerker from this episode. That was so standout to me. Let me know how that touched you as well. And also, it's quite interesting, Meghan said that she believed that the press really wanted to stir the pot with, members of her family on her maternal side especially. And they were surprised to learn that many of them would not take the bait. And she talked about that. That was so interesting. And they also touched on how people had been approached, not only family members, but people who she had worked with, acquaintances, to try and put out misinformation and disinformation about her. We know about the famous story of the guy who turned down $70,000, I think it was dollars, to basically smear Meghan and besmirch her character. He said, no thanks. And Prince Harry talked about that as well. Can you imagine all those stories coming out? And it was so moving for Prince Harry to say that there were some stories where he had to go and ask her about them. Talk about a learning curve as well for that relationship. And by the way, another standout to me was Prince Harry talking about how he felt Meghan was such a perfect and rare find for him in the position that he was in, with how he had been hounded by the tabloids and how they had put so much scrutiny on his past relationships and driven, past girlfriends from his life. But there he said, when he finally found Meghan, that he felt her to be so rare. And he talked about how he followed his heart, and his heart made him know that she was the one. But his head also said she would be perfect for the role. And he also talked about how people had interesting perceptions of Meghan, negative ones in this instance, that her having the whole actress tag and her being, quote, Hollywood, they felt that when he brought her over, that it wouldn't last. And this is why I love Prince Harry. And he says he is his mother's son. He has this interesting quote where he says that when they met Meghan, people within the institution, that they didn't think, quote, a ginger would be able to bag someone like her. I just found that so interesting. I guess there's a whole, kind of bias there against people who are redheads that, he has gone through, and he needs to, and of course needs more unpacking. The fact that he says that he, as a, quote, ginger, having bagged someone of that caliber, beautiful and intelligent, and who is interested in charity work and philanthropy, and people saying, oh, she's an actress, it won't work. So even Meghan acknowledges that the whole, quote, actress thing really hindered a lot of initial perceptions of her. So Prince Harry, he talks about his mom, Princess Diana, and he says that he's blocked out a lot of early memories of her, but he does recall her cheeky laugh, and he says that there will always be a cheeky side to him as well. And he also talks about the fact that they would be on holiday, and there would be always someone somewhere with a camera jumping out of a bush. And, he was always told, don't react, don't feed into it. So yes, it's quite interesting that Prince Harry and Meghan, they are turning the spotlight on the tabloid media, the culture of greed. They are the villain of the story, not, the royal family. Not who, people were saying brace for. He is actually defending his sister-in-law. He's defending other women who've entered into that family and how they've been treated. His own mother, what she went through, especially, as he said, after the separation, and how the press, tabloid media, they were just in a feeding frenzy for any image of her. And the documentary makers take clips from other members of the royal family calling out the media. We've seen those past clips of the Princess Diana telling the paparazzi to leave her children alone and to protect children. We even have a clip of Prince Charles saying that they are poking at, them from every corner. And, it's so intrusive, his own mouth, his own words. We have another clip of even Charles Spencer calling out the tabloid media and their remorselessness and their pursuit, So yes, Prince Harry said this, quote, "We know the full truth, the institution knows the full truth, and the media know the full truth because they've been in on it." So if you see some step up of attacks against Meghan, if you see them picking apart certain parts of this documentary, trying to shift, people's gaze from them, then we understand why. We know how they've covered Harry and Meghan. Some segments of them, of course, we're not calling them all out, but more so the tabloid media. It's been something that everyone can witness. They've been ruthless. They've had a lot to have introspection concerning. And I'm just hoping that people will not be distracted and keep the focus on the main thing, keeping the main thing. So let's hope there's change. We can always pray and hope that we'll see some change. And of course, as we talk about the popularity of the couple and how people, of course, trying to, quote, knock them down a peg, we have to also talk about that, what the impact was on Meghan, that in the end, Prince Harry looked at that suffering and said he had to step in. And we've seen some of their worst detractors who have called them out time and time again, people who have their own vendettas against Meghan after being, quote, ghosted by her. Should the people who are consuming that kind of coverage perhaps spare a thought that might be that own person's perspective of her and not so easily accept it? I think there's a lot of things that are going to be quite predictable because Prince Harry and Meghan have chosen to target certain segments of the media, and they're going to try and protect themselves, obviously, and perhaps shift blame or distract. So let's keep the main thing, and rise above. We don't have to go to a low level, to the gutter to fight them. We can't get into that whole mudslinging. We've watched it going on. No one's saying the Sussexes are perfect, but we are saying when we've seen the wrong, we're going to call it out and hope for change, right? We've seen Prince Harry and Meghan sue newspaper publishers and get success. The High Court ruling that the Mail on Sunday had invaded Meghan's privacy by publishing her private letter that she'd sent to her estranged father, Thomas Markle. We've seen it again, Prince Harry also winning. And so Prince Harry's talked about the workings of the royal Rota and how the reporters are assigned to cover public events of the royal family. And the fact that Meghan said that they were some of them who are trying to destroy her. We'll see what happens. I think the next part is going to get so deep. There's a lot in the trailer we've not seen yet. So it's wonderful that they are going to talk about the fact that there has been an attempt to misrepresent this couple, mistruths about them in the press. A lot of the things that Meghan has gone through with, quote, protocol that she's broken. They even talked about how she had there was all of a sudden hair protocol, and Prince Harry said that there were things they were just making up on the fly to get Meghan. out of favor with the British public. We're going to talk about how their popularity in the beginning may have been threatening, and there may have been an attempt to put them down. There's just so much to talk about this. Prince Harry talks about the fact that it is important for he and Meghan not to make the same mistakes that perhaps their parents made. Yeah, we see snippets of family life. We see Archie and Lily. Oh my gosh, they're such an adorable family. And they talk about the fact that both he and Meghan are the products of divorce, and they've learned so much. And Meghan talked about that poem that she had. Oh, what a touching moment. Totally teared up listening to that. And also, Prince Harry talks about the fact that he shoulders a lot of responsibility for Meghan's estrangement from Thomas. He said this, quote, "She had a father before this, and now she doesn't have a father," end quote. And he says, quote, "And I shouldered that because if Meg wasn't with me, then her dad would still be her dad," end quote. So yes, he talks about how incredibly sad it is for Meghan, and he knows that she was a daddy's girl, to see that relationship just disconnected. And as I said before, Doria talked about the fact that she was, quote, absolutely stunned that her ex would be, quote, a part of this circus, end quote. And she said this, she said that certainly as a parent, that's not what you do, that's not parenting. And it's so sad, she said, that the media would run with it. And of course, making and that collaboration of him capitalizing on it. Yeah, so that was surprising as well. So a few more standouts to me that I'll just touch on. Meghan talking about wearing her neutral hues in deference to other senior working royals. I remember very vividly there was some commentary on Meghan's beige camel outfits. They kept asking, "Girl, when are you gonna break out of that tone?" So she finally explains it to us. She said that when she was in the UK, she rarely wore color, and there was thought in that. Meghan says this, quote, "To my understanding, you could never wear the same color as Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth, and if there is a group event, but then you also shouldn't be wearing the same color as one of the other more senior members of the family," alluding to Kate and of course Camilla. So she was like, quote, "Well, what's a color that they'll probably never wear? Camel, beige, white?" And of course we see all the photos of her, and she has that image of her in the wrap coat during her first Sandringham Christmas, and the famous hat. And they talk about the fact that, you know, it was of course compared to the poo emoji, and she says she was learning. So once again, that theme. Prince Harry is learning, she is learning. That was one of the funnier moments in this. Made me absolutely just laugh. So what do you think about her first Sandringham Christmas with her tan coat and the hat? And another moment that just made me smile was her saying that her first Christmas was so heartwarming, and she was speaking to Prince Philip the whole time, thinking she was having such a great time. And Prince Harry said that no, she was speaking into his bad ear. He hadn't heard a word she had said, and she says, "Wow, great," because she thought they had a great time. That was funny as well. There's just so much. I could go on and on. Now, share your thoughts with me on your standouts in the Harry and Meghan docuseries. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. And of course, the huge takeaway is that I guess we're all learning, and we've learned so much about this couple. I've got to say that Prince Harry and Meghan, they love each other, just like what Tyler said, and he has the Holy Ghost and I have the Holy Spirit, and I've got to say that they love each other, and there is that appeal, of course. That's why they have that whole fairy tale of the soldier prince who marries his American princess, and we want them to have a happily ever after, of course. So once again, share with me your highlights in the comment section. Now, before we log off, as always, a special thank you to those who support this channel financially. To my Patreon, PayPal, and membership supporters, I would like to say a heartfelt thank you. And I would like to give a shout out right now to a couple of you who support this channel. I would like to say thank you to you, Delcinia Preston. Thank you so much for your giving and your love. Thank you to Joyce. Joyce, I want to say that I appreciate you. Thank you very, very, very much for choosing to come along with me on this journey. I would like also to say thank you to Bernadine Robinson. I'm so grateful to God for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And thank you to Gail Tapscott. Gail, you are so dear to me and you warm my heart, and I appreciate you so very much. And thank you now to a couple of newer supporters of this channel. Thank you to Valerie Smith. Valerie, thank you, thank you, thank you. And Deanna Animashawn. Please know that I love you and your support is so very appreciated on this channel. And thank you to Leslie Allerhead. Leslie, you are absolutely dear and special to me. Thank you for your giving. And now, a special thank you to those who gave during the last live. Thank you to Black Queen for your generosity as always. I appreciate that so very much. So once again, leave your thoughts and highlights in the comment section. I would like to know all your thoughts. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, click that subscribe button, let YouTube know you enjoyed what you watched. Have a great day, and I love you all, and I'll catch you in the next one. Have a blessed one.